My guest today is an author, a coach, and she healed herself of cancer through the act of surrender. I'd love to welcome to the show my good friend, Jaka Duncan. Hi, Jaka.
Hey, Ed, thanks for having me.
Oh my God, I'm so glad to have you here. We had a conversation yesterday, and I knew that I
Mhm.
just had to get back and have a conversation with you today and share it with as many people as I could.
And I appreciate that. That's great.
So run us through the story.
Well, surrendering was something that I had been told on numerous occasions in my journey of trying to heal my body of cancer that would benefit me. And I kept saying, I don't know what the heck it is. What is surrendering? I don't know what surrendering is. I couldn't figure it out. And just to backtrack a little bit, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2007. I decided to do the Western route and had surgery, chemo, radiation, went on hormone therapy. And then almost 10 years later, I got the news that the cancer was back. In those 10 years, I had read a lot of self-help books. I'd gone to a few retreats. I started to work on myself a bit. I kind of thought that I'd worked enough on myself, actually, that the cancer wouldn't come back, but alas, it came back. But one of the things I had done too was I had started to listen to my intuition. And my intuition was saying, no Western medicine this time, holistic. So I scrapped the idea of surgery or chemo or anything like that and started doing all kinds of holistic treatments. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. And then in October 2018, I got the news that the cancer had in fact gained ground and it had spread to the uterus and to the cervix. So I now had cancer in 3 different places. Stage 4, holy cow, this just totally, it just brought me to my knees. And I surrendered. I finally felt this shift in me where I got it. You get it when you get it.
Mm-hmm.
I got it. And I realized that I had been brilliant at stuffing down all kinds of unwanted emotions, feelings, whatever, and covering it up with a smile and putting myself out there, basically saying to the world, nothing going on here. I'm great. Don't worry about me. Everything's perfect. Right. And I realized that all of that was festering in my body and had created tumors. So what I started doing, which I call my surrender practice, is I allowed myself to feel. I had actually had to teach myself to feel, anger, fear, shame, guilt, regret, you name it. And over the span of, a couple of years, I had also really put the microscope on myself and started to live in a bit more of a heightened awareness to try and figure out what made me tick and why I had ended up with cancer twice in my life before the age of 50, when I was not a smoker, not a big drinker, not overweight. I exercise, I eat healthy. I did everything quote unquote right. And yet here I was, before the age of 50, stage 4 cancer. And I realized that I had a lot of limiting beliefs, a lot of limiting beliefs that took its root in most of them in my childhood and in my teenage years. And so I became aware of them, but I didn't really know how to let that go or what to do with it, right? Did not have a good relationship with my father, so lots of father issues. And it was in that moment of being told stage 4 cancer, I think 4 out of 5 people in that predicament don't make it to 5 years, that I finally realized I need to actually allow myself to feel all of these emotions, to be with these limiting beliefs and be okay with them, be in full allowance of them rather than reject them and avoid them.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
surrender can be taken as so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
Surrender could be I give up, and that's not the kind of surrender you're talking about. So
No.
if you could define the type of surrender that you're talking about, can you define that a little bit?
So basically, surrendering is letting go of resistance. So I was resisting anger, fear, guilt, shame, all of those things. I wasn't allowing myself to feel. And a lot of us do this because society teaches us that it's not okay to be angry. It's not okay to be afraid, right? So we stuff it down. And so in my meditations, I would bring up an incident, in my head, and where I would feel the anger. So, for example, I had quite a bit of anger towards my body for letting me down. I was seemingly doing everything right, and I was still dying of cancer. And so I just really revved that up, and I would really let myself get angry. And then when it was like a 10 out of 10, I would be like, it's okay. It's okay. I'm allowed to feel this anger. It's okay that I feel this anger. I'm allowed to feel this anger. And because what I would do is that anger would just be bubbling inside of me, and my body would feel it. There would be tension in my chest, and I would feel a tightening in my throat, and I would be like, sweating and sometimes crying. And then I would kind of in my mind take a step back and become the witness of it. And so this can be thought of as your higher consciousness, right? Which is also kind of the light. And so if the anger is, if you think of that as the darkness, and then you take a step back and you say, it's okay. It's okay. You're shining the light on the darkness. And of course, we all know that darkness can't survive in the light. And so eventually it starts to dissipate. And so you're literally just, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And the anger just kind of finally gets to where it's 100% okay.
Wow.
So in regards to my body having cancer and the anger that I felt towards it, when I was 100% okay with my body having cancer and 100% okay with the anger became a non-issue. It dissipated, and I was no longer triggered. So I had cancer.
You let it all in, and then you created some space between it.
Yeah, I allowed it. Yeah, I held space for the anger. I acknowledged the anger is what I did. And then what I would do, once I was 100% okay with, in this case, the anger, because there was a lot of different emotions and whatnot and different levels. But in this case, so I'm 100% okay. I knew I was okay because I would, like, it was like the weight of the world was taken off my shoulders. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, I felt relaxed. But I also started to feel this inner peace. And I started to feel this kind of more of a loving feeling, right? And so then I would go and I would just bask in that peace. And this peace is a really high vibration. And our inner healer also vibrates up there. And I knew that the longer that I held myself in this vibration of peace through meditating, the more of a chance that my body had to heal. And then on top of that, I would visualize myself already healthy. And so we were traveling around Asia at the time. I had run into a few people who had showed me amazing pictures of them hiking to base camp. And I love hiking, I love nature, and I had hardly any energy to walk a half a mile, let alone, however long it is to hike to base camp. And so my vision was hiking with one of my best friends, Melissa, up to base camp, and a Sherpa carrying my backpack. That was my vision of absolute vibrant health. And then I would feel as if it had already happened. So I would feel the emotions, I would feel the freedom and the joy and the gratitude. Because what I had learned from Dr. Joe Dispenza is that a vision is, so we live in an electromagnetic field, and our thoughts and our visions are the electro part. So you're putting it out there in the universe. Our emotions is the magnetic part. And we live in a universe where there is the law of attraction. And so our emotions will attract that, right? And so it's really, really was important for me to heighten my vibration and feel the emotions as if I was already healed, as if I was already hiking to base camp. And so after every surrender meditation, the minute I started to feel lightened up and I knew I'd let go of the lower vibration emotion, I would then take myself to that vision. And I would bask in these emotions and feel the freedom and feel the joy and feel the gratitude and the exuberance and so I would be in meditation for 3 hours sometimes and have no concept of time, because it was just so beautiful.
And this just came naturally to you as something you felt you had to do.
Well, I had taken quite a few courses, and so I that had kind of led me, but it, again, you get it when you get it. I wasn't getting it and wasn't getting it, and then in that moment when I got, the news, that's when I finally realized, okay, I need to allow myself to feel.
Mm-hmm.
I need to acknowledge these feelings. If I
During
don't acknowledge them, they're going to stay stuck.
So during this time, did you feel like you were curing yourself?
No,
Or
no. So I knew,
that
I
you just
knew
went
it
about?
was, what's that?
Or is this something you just went about? Like, this is
I,
what I
well,
need
it felt
to do now.
right. It felt right, and like I said, I was really trusting my intuition. And so I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And then, so that was the end of October when I started that. In February, I was in Thailand, and we were told about this place called the Tao Garden in Chiang Mai, which is a pretty high-end place of like holistic healing. And my husband really wanted me to get tested. And at that point, I'm like, no, I'm good. I was flying high. I was like, I'm doing really good. I'm meditating, I'm surrendering, and I don't need to know. I don't need to know anymore. I'm good. But he convinced me. So we went and got a whole bunch of tests done. And when I went for the results and I heard you are cancer free, I just about fell off the chair. Like, I actually had to say to the doctor, okay, let me just get this straight. There is no cancer in my breast, there's no cancer in my uterus, and there's no cancer in my cervix. And he said, there's no active cancer in your body. It blew me away. It really did. It really did. Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that moment was like.
The tears were streaming down my face, and I just sat there in awe. And the doctor had an accent and he said, you happy, right?
A little bit.
I'm like, yeah, definitely. And it was so, I just didn't expect it. That there, I will admit, there were moments afterwards that I thought, okay, maybe he got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he got it wrong. But now, it's been over a year, right, since I got that news, and I'm healthy.
So when you got back to Canada,
Mm-hmm.
you go back to the doctors that had diagnosed you in the first place? And
No, I don't go to Western. I don't go to, no. I didn't have a very good experience with the doctors when I told them that I wasn't choosing Western medicine. They didn't take it very well. So I'm all for Western medicine. If I were to break a leg or need my tonsils out or anything like that, I'm there. But when it comes to something like cancer, I just don't believe it wasn't for me.
right.
And that doesn't mean I'm not, if other people choose it, I think it's all individual, but for me, it was not an option.
Well,
Yeah.
obviously it was the right option for you. So
Yeah.
you talked about you touched on limiting beliefs earlier and the different levels of limiting beliefs and how many you had to go through. Can you give me a couple of examples of the limiting beliefs you were struggling with?
So a big one was fear of rejection. Fear of rejection showed up everywhere. And I was like, really? I thought I dealt with this already. And here it is again. And this fear of rejection started in my childhood. I had a father who was a bully. He was a bit narcissistic. And he could be the best father. He could be the funnest father. He was a great provider as long as everything was going his way. And so if it wasn't going his way, then shit hit the fan, right, so to speak. And he would reject. And he rejected me in my adult years too. We didn't speak for 10 years. He wanted nothing to do with me. Now, when I was born in the Netherlands, and we immigrated to Canada when I was 13 years old. So in the Netherlands, I don't know, have you ever been there?
No, haven't.
Beautiful country, beautiful country. Flat, very tiny, lots of bicycles. Mm-hmm. So there was really no obesity at all in the Netherlands when I lived there. I lived there in the 70s. We immigrated in 1982. And when we moved to Canada, the obesity rate was significantly higher. And I guess because, you know, people just aren't as physically fit, you know, and that isn't everybody, of course. Some people are very fit, but in Holland, you know, everybody just hopped on the bike and went everywhere and ate, you know, home cooked meals. And that just was a little tougher to do in Canada when 8 months out of the year, you're in winter. And so the obesity rate was higher. And I started to become very aware of people's judgments and rejection of those people who were struggling with their weight, including my parents. And they said some really not very nice things about, people who were overweight and obese. And so I didn't realize this at the time, but as I was putting a microscope on myself, I started to realize what had happened was that I, in my subconscious brain, had made a connection that if you are overweight or obese, you are not lovable. You will be rejected and you will be bullied and whatever. Now, thankfully, I was a fit child. I was in sports and my mother was an incredibly healthy cook. And so I never struggled with weight until I went to university and I packed on the freshman 15 or thereabouts, came home at Christmas time and my mother said, "Whoa, Jacob, what have you done?" And my father, you know, and my parents made a couple of other somewhat innocent comments, and there was no meanness there. There really wasn't, like, I don't think they realized it wasn't done purposefully. Let's put it that way. And I was mortified. And I was so angry with myself for having let myself go. Now, the fresh 15 pounds, it maybe not even that, 13 pounds maybe. I'm 5'8", right? It's not a huge amount of weight. It may as well have been 100 pounds. What did I do? I went back to university. I needed to eat. I wasn't, you know, so anorexia wasn't
right,
an option for me. Cafeteria food is what I was eating. And I had been partying a fair bit as well, you know, as most kids do when they first start going to university, leaving home. And I wasn't willing to give that up either. And so I became bulimic. And for almost 20 years, I was bulimic and no one ever caught me because I was never too skinny and I hid it really, really well. My husband didn't even know. And it wasn't that I did it all the time either. I could go a week without it, sometimes a couple of weeks without it, because if I wasn't behaving in a bulimic way, I was incredibly regimented and controlling when it came to what food went in my mouth and how much I exercised. And so, but the minute I would fall off the wagon, you know, because I would have such a tightrope, you know, I was like a pressure cooker on the inside, really. Right. And then if that just kind of blew up a bit, and then I'd start eating everything in sight, and then I'm like, oh, you know, okay. And then I would throw it up in the toilet, and then I would beat myself up thinking, oh my God, how pathetic. Because of course I knew it was unhealthy. I had a teaching degree in physical education and I had taken some nutrition courses. I was well aware of how unhealthy this act was, but my fear of rejection and my fear of being unlovable was so strong that I continued doing it. So
Wow.
then in 2007, I get diagnosed with cancer, and I'm like, okay, this needs to stop. This behavior needs to stop. My grandmother, incidentally, had been bulimic her entire adult life. Like, I don't even think bulimia even had been given a name yet when she was bulimic. And she ended up with metastasized esophageal cancer and died. And so I'm thinking, okay, I need to stop this behavior.
Mm.
So I stopped. And I thought, okay, I'm good. I'm healed. I'm no longer bulimic. And it was a few years later, 2013, I'm in Mexico. I'm doing an ayahuasca retreat with Dr. Gabor Mate. First time with ayahuasca. That's another whole podcast if you're interested in that. I won't go into too much detail other than the fact that it became apparent that there was still a lot of shame attached to the fact that I had been bulimic. And no one knew. No one, I had not ever told anyone about this. And so, you know, secrets often have a lot of shame attached. So in ceremony, I was told by my higher self, with the help of ayahuasca, that it would be a good idea for me to tell people about this. And so this group of about 25, 30 people at this retreat, none of whom I really knew, was the first group of people that I told of my shameful secret. And I was crying and crying, crying. And I thought, oh my God, they must think I'm so pathetic, right? And so then I went back to Canada and I told my husband and I told, you know, some other people about it. And I thought, okay, when I can talk about it without emotions rising up in me, I'm healed. I'm good. And so that happened and I was able to talk about it quite freely. So I'm like, okay, I'm healed. All's good. And then about 2 years ago, I realized, oh, shit, another layer. I still struggle with the eating disorder. Not that I'm hovering over the toilet anymore, but the control was still there. The fear of rejection was still there. So what I had done, I don't know, like 2016 or something like that, or no, around 2012 probably, I had heard about intermittent fasting. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I decided to give that a try. And I had put on a bit of weight over the winter. My shorts and my summer clothes were feeling a little tight. Now, a little bit of weight, maybe 5 pounds, not a big deal. But in my mind, it was a huge deal. So I decided I was going to do a cleanse and I was going to start trying this intermittent fasting. And this is healthy, right?
Supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Not for someone who has tendencies of an eating disorder, but I didn't know that at the time. So I'm thinking, yeah, I'm doing something really healthy. And so I managed to shrink my window of eating from noon to 6 o'clock, because that's what intermittent fasting is, right? Is that you eat in a small window and then your body metabolizes the food in about 8 hours. And then once it's completely metabolized, then you are burning fat, right? So that's healthy. And the other component is that cancer cells thrive on sugar. And so if you have 8 hours where you've metabolized all your food and then you don't eat for another, let's say 8 hours, that means for those 8 hours, there's no sugar in your system. So cancer cells can't grow. So I'm thinking, I don't ever want cancer again. This is going to work out for me. It didn't, obviously. The cancer came back. But anyhow, I ate this way for about 5 years, incredibly regimented. And so for me, in my head, it was always calculating, okay, when can I eat? When do I need to fast? What can I eat? Well, I can't have sugar and I can't have white bread or white rice or white flour. And God forbid I have junk food. And right, there were so many, I can't do that, right? And so many no's, so many restrictions. But that was just the way, that's all I knew. And I was about 130, 135 pounds at 5'8". So never too skinny, but I was a pressure cooker on the inside.
Right.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I realized, and then I started water fasting. Have you heard of water fasting?
No, I don't know that one.
So water fasting, I started that in October of 2017, when I had cancer already, because basically for however many days that you decide to do this, you only drink water. You don't eat. Again, with the same idea that you are not, there's no sugar in your system, and so cancer cells will die, right? So I started water fasting 4 days, only drinking water and some ginger water. And ginger is really good appetite suppressant. And there are moments of complete euphoria. There's moments of, like just peel me off the floor, right? Exhaustion. I couldn't sleep. I struggled with sleep anyhow. And everything, bowel movements, everything got messed up. And I did this every 3 weeks. I would go 4 days without eating.
Wow.
4 days of water fasting.
Wow.
I got so skinny. I was down to like 120 pounds. I had not ever been that weight since my teenage years. And my friends were commenting and I secretly loved it. And all of these sick thoughts started to come back, these eating disorder thoughts. And again, in the spring of 2018, I did an ayahuasca retreat and it came up. And I knew I can't do it anymore. Water fasting is not going to heal my body. Water fasting is not meant for someone who has an eating disorder. And that's when I realized I do still have an eating disorder, because it is an emotional thing. And then I realized I needed to deal with the reason I became bulimic in the first place. I had not ever looked at that. Why? And when I started to investigate that, I realized, it was fear of rejection. It was fear of not being lovable.
It's just amazing how much ties back.
Yeah. So it took me all the way back to when I was 13. Yeah.
Very period of time.
Yeah. Just, and so I will say that my parents, other than them saying, "Whoa, what have you done, Jayka?" they never ever said to me any bad things in regards to, oh, you're fat or you're this or you're that. It was never directed towards me, but they were saying about other people. Right. And so we need to be so careful.
Right.
I mean, you're a bit of an expert when it comes to parenting, so you would know this.
Okay, that's hard.
Well, no, but anyhow, I think it's so important how we speak to our children, but it's equally important how we speak to others in front of our children, because they will catch, they're going to make conclusions in their head. And that's what happened to me.
The effect that you can have on other human beings, never mind just kids. It's just amazing, especially though at that impressionable age, because they're looking for how the world judges them and how the world accepts them, and that's just fascinating.
Well, and I mean, the media puts so much pressure on us as well, right? And so it wasn't just my parents, it was also the media and so I was an over exerciser, and I was running half marathons, and I was a swimmer, and I was
so isn't it interesting, all the things that we say are healthy? You need to get enough exercise, you need to get enough water, you need to eat right, you need to do all that stuff.
I was doing all of that,
and you were looking great, but inside you were a wreck.
So this is what I discovered. When we are a pressure cooker, which is what my body was, in survival mode, when you are in survival mode, your body cannot function optimally. All the energy goes into the arms and legs so that we can either fight or we can run or freeze, right? Those are the way. And what's compromised is our metabolism, our immune system, our cardiovascular system, our hormonal system, our digestion. Everything is compromised. And so I was in a perpetual state of fear of rejection, a perpetual state of fear. And so here I was doing all of these healthy things, but my body wasn't able to benefit from it because because of the state I was in, the state of being I was in. And so the irony was, here we are in Asia. We traveled the world for 15 months. That's another podcast, by the way.
That story. Yeah, that's another podcast. That's definitely another podcast.
So at that point, I had already more or less surrendered and said, you know what, I'm going to enjoy food, because I wasn't enjoying food anymore. You know, there was just too much stress around it. And I finally realized I need to just enjoy food. We go to Asia. We were there for 8.5 months. I can't read the labels, obviously. And they really love sugar there. So a lot of the sauces, a lot of stuff is very sweet. And white rice, you know, lots of white rice. There wasn't much whole, you know, brown rice or wild rice or anything. So my eating ended up being not nearly as good, not nearly as healthy.
Right.
However, my state of being was so much healthier. So I was able to enjoy the food. And this is what I realized. I hate Brussels sprouts, right? And I had said to my husband, if I ate a Brussels sprout because it's healthy, but I hate it, I'm not going to benefit from it at all, because that hating it is resistance, which means, right? If I have a piece of chocolate, however, and I love it, that love raises my vibration, and, you know, it's high, it's raising my vibration, and it's part of, you know, it helps me heal. So I started to realize that, okay, it's not even, I mean, yes, what you eat is important. Obviously, you know, I didn't turn into a junk food eater.
Right.
But to just be more in allowance, and also allow myself to eat things like chocolate and savor them, and how important it is to take a moment while you're eating and actually savoring it, being present with it. You know, so many in the olden days, people would take a moment before sitting down or before eating and give thanks, right? And a little prayer.
Right.
There's not many people that do that anymore, which is unfortunate, because that
Really
moment
is.
you're in prayer, you're present and you're in gratitude. And gratitude is a beautiful high vibration too. And then you start to eat already in this beautiful heightened vibration, so that your body can absorb the nutrients. And so when I was still in Canada, I was testing my pH. So when your body is acidic, it becomes a petri dish for disease. So what you want is an acidity of 7.1, I think it is, right? Not too alkaline, not too acidic, 7.1. Mine was about a 3, which is incredibly acidic. And acidic foods is sugar and junk food and meat and alcohol and caffeine and all of that. And I wasn't eating any of it. I was eating a vegan diet, and I could not get my pH up to 7.0. And I finally stopped testing, because I'm like, you know, I was doing it every day, 3 times a day, peeing on a little pH strip. And so a couple of years later, I'm in Thailand, they want to test my pH, and I'm like, no. I said, don't bother. I said, it's going to be really bad. And if anything, I have been eating so many acidic foods here, the white rice, the sweet sauces, whatever. I'm like, it's going to be terrible.
Right.
And they did an in-depth pH test, and I was 7.0. And I was like, what? How can that be?
Right.
And that's when I realized, again, you know, and I was eating healthy things in Asia too, but if there was just, you know, it was a bit of everything. It wasn't as regimented, but I realized how important our vibration is when we eat. Yeah.
And a lot of it comes down to balance, you know, balance. So it's, you're balancing what you were eating with your emotional state, and the state of your vibration, and how happy you are. And I just find that so interesting that you experienced all these really large and profound concepts through this journey that you took. And we're able to you're able now to kind of process them and put them and articulate them in such a way that other people can benefit from what you've been through. And it's just there are so many takeaways here on so many different levels. It's just incredible to me. Just what you just this last couple minutes, how you just explain that. With the acidity, I've never really thought about that. I've never really thought about like the acidity of my body.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's so much here for people to learn from.
Yeah.
And it really does. A lot of it does come down to paying attention to your whole self.
Yes. And what the biggest takeaway that I have gotten is that the most important thing is my level of inner peace, joy, love, right? My state of being. And that was the thing, is when I had the aha moment of, oh, this is how I surrender, I realized that I had been doing. Everything was doing, and that it actually had nothing to do with doing. It had everything to do with my state of being. And I raised my vibration by letting go of all of the fears of rejection, like I said, was the biggest one, and letting go of the need of perfection, right? And it's that's a big one for society, and especially women, right? We just put so much pressure on ourselves to look perfect, with the hair and the makeup and the body and the this and the that, and you know, we're innately perfect. And
Absolutely.
if we can
Absolutely.
embrace ourselves and realize, and this was my biggest takeaway that I had, I don't need fixing. Nobody needs to be fixed. We are innately perfect. That was like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. All I needed to do was embrace myself just the way I was. And what I also realized, that this fear of rejection, yes, it was triggered in my childhood, primarily my father. But you know what? The biggest issue was that I had rejected myself for decades. And when I started to surrender all these limiting beliefs, I did it in a way of embracing myself. So I realized that that was the underlying issue. I didn't love myself, and I rejected myself, and I didn't honor myself, right? And the surrender practice turned all of that around.
It,
And
it,
I have put myself on the top of the list.
it's incredible. So we think of different foundations within ourselves. So our good health, physical health, is seen as probably the foundation to most people. Good mental health as well. And you found a foundation really innate below all of that that supports the entire thing.
Yes.
And it's one of those things that it's simple, but it's not easy to attain.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? It is simple once you get it, right? And the process is not fun, especially when you first start, because you're opening up a can of worms. There's a reason that you have swept all that shit under the rug, because it is truly shit, right? And you just need to be patient with yourself, and you need to trust that there is the light at the end of the tunnel, right? So once you open up that can of worms and you're in the depths of that tunnel, there is the light, and you just have to trust that and keep at it and keep going and be patient and be gentle with yourself. Yeah. And because there isn't a human being on earth that hasn't had trauma of some sort in their
Right.
life. And whether they're aware of it or not, some of it can be very subconscious, some of it can be generational, right? We talked about a bit of that yesterday, and it's just
Yep.
literally you're mimicking your parents or whoever raised you, and their thought patterns and beliefs and behaviors. And so we can all benefit from surrendering and learn to love ourselves and come from that place of self-love. And when you come from a place of self-love, you're not just benefiting yourself, you're benefiting everybody, because you are then being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if not, then you're the people pleaser.
Right. And who
Which
knew
I
that?
was with the capital P.
Right. And who knew that self-love could be so powerful and
Yes.
so
Yes.
direct? Like, and that's what I feel is happening now in society, and it's to me, it's been going on for quite some time, but it seems to be ramping up, which is great, is that
Mhm.
people are starting to wake up a little bit and realize that these are not weaknesses, that
No.
that these are actually some of the greatest strengths you can have as a human being, is self-love and vulnerability and letting things in,
Yeah.
and surrender. All of these things, that all of these walls that we've put up over the years and have been put up for us. We talked about the media a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
and how they double down, like you take a fear that you might have and double down on it, with
Mhm.
messaging and imagery and whatnot. I, I have a feeling, and you're living proof, uh, that that a lot of those walls are starting to come down, and a lot of those messages, those deep inner messages, are starting to come out in us.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me so hopeful for the future, is stories like yours, and many of the others that I've heard, just even recently, where people are having these awakenings. uh,
Mhm.
it's just incredible.
Well, and the these times are a perfect time with COVID-19, right? The way I see it, cancer broke me open, so I was able to let the light in, right?
Right.
That's Cancer is what was the gift that finally, I mean, cancer was a symptom of my state of being, and gifted me incredible amount. And I feel that this gift is also in COVID-19 for a huge amount of humanity, and for people to finally let go and acknowledge themselves,
Yeah.
right? Because again, so much of who we are is based from our childhood, and most of us feel that we weren't acknowledged,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
So
so,
this has put you down a completely new path. And
yes.
so you've written a book, which I
Oh,
ordered yesterday.
thank
Um,
you.
while we
Thank you.
were while we were on our call, I actually ordered it.
Yeah.
So tell us about the book, and tell us about your coaching, and how. One thing that really struck me about our conversation is how enthusiastic you are, and how much you want to help people, and just how much you
Yeah.
want to share. And that is just such a beautiful thing about you, that just came through. Like, you have this passion, and you have this need to help as many people as you possibly could. And we went through the whole writing of the book yesterday, and I just can't wait to read it. So tell us about the book, and what you do to help.
So, yes, I am passionate. As a matter of fact, I want to shout it from the rooftops, right? So thanks for letting me on your rooftop.
Yep.
Uh, and my book is called Healed by Cancer. And literally, it's very raw, it's very real. You mentioned vulnerability. Well, that's my middle name nowadays. So the book itself was an act of surrendering. My higher self has sent me messages for the last couple of years that I finally, learned to trust and listen to. And as I was writing the book, my little voice would say to me, write about this, write about that, write about that. And these were things that I'm like, no, 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 no. Nobody needs to know about that. Those are my little secrets. No, no, no. No, write about it, write about it, write about it. And I'm like, ugh, okay. So there are secrets. I mean, I write about the bulimia, but there are other secrets that I write about, and I won't let it out of the bag. You'll find out on your own, that had a lot of shame attached and a lot of regret. And I wrote about it, and realizing how many people I have helped with that, because we all have secrets. And what I realized is how many people said, Jake, it's really not that bad. But in my head, right, it just grew and grew and grew and grew, when really, it was this big. And if that was the case with me, what's the likelihood that that's the case with others? I've learned that we are more alike than we are different.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I've had numerous people contact me, people that I know, people that I don't know, from across the world, and have said, it's like you wrote my story.
Hmm.
And how much they could relate. And these are not people like this. Yes, it's called Healed by Cancer. And yes, I had cancer, but this book is not about cancer.
Mhm.
This book is about surrendering, and this book is about tapping into your essence and um, embracing love and embodying love, right? And yeah, tapping into the grace within. That's what the book is about. And I go into detail as to how to surrender and the importance of awareness. And yeah, and the book just kind of flowed out of me.
And I was just about to say that. So you know that you're onto something when something is almost effortless and just kind of comes out.
Yeah.
And in my writing, I experienced that as well. And you go, wow, that just happened. Or
Yeah.
even anything you do, like sometimes the work you do just flows out effortlessly, and that's when you know it's your best. That's when you know you
Well, because I
tapped
feel
it.
that's when it's an inspired action,
Right,
right?
right,
Yeah. And I did go through a writer's block for a couple of months, and my little voice said, you still have to live the rest of your book. So just, and that's when I built my practice. So I have innerhealthouterwealth.com, which is, a coaching business where I help people surrender. And you can find my blog on there, podcast. I've got a YouTube channel. Everything is right there. And so I created that during the time that I was experiencing writer's block. And then I think it was the end of November, I opened up my little iPad and started writing. And for 10 days, I didn't stop. And it just flowed through me. And when it was done, I knew it. I knew the moment it was done. Okay, I'm done. And I reread and I was like, I wrote that?
right.
Like I was so in the zone
Hmm.
that it was it was being written. It was almost like I got out of the way and it just wrote itself kind of thing. So yeah, there's a couple times and I was like, oh, I wrote that. Okay, yeah, that's really good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
The other thing that strikes me about you is how quickly you took action, how quickly you take action, and then the perseverance behind it. And I think that is I think a huge takeaway from our conversation here that I got, that I'm taking away is that it's we talked about simple but hard, right? So it's a simple thing, but it's not easy.
Right.
And a lot of things are simple and hard, and then you never get done because it requires that action. It even just requires that one tiny step forward. And you took that tiny step forward, but then you took the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah.
And it's so many different times, I'm sure, like we talked about, you could have stopped, you could have quit when it got hard, but it
Mm-hmm.
didn't. And the thing that's interesting when I talk to people who attain that level of flow and that level of it just comes out, it on the flip side of that, if you're not in that flow and you're struggling to find that place, it's very easy to look and say, well, yeah, well, you're in flow and it's easy for you.
And they get annoyed.
But it takes that step. It takes work to
It
get
takes work and it takes trust.
right.
Trust in yourself, trust in the process, believing in yourself, right? And that was something I had to cultivate too. For years, I always assumed everybody else knew better.
Mm.
And finally, I learned to listen to my intuition and trust my intuition. And I sometimes call my intuition my inner shit disturber because it pushes me way out of my comfort zone at times, right? Where my ego is like, no, 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 right? And my intuition is like, get out there.
Right.
So that go-getter in me is partly that, right? Where I'm like, oh shit, okay, all right, here I go. I'm doing it.
That's a great place to start. If you're starting to go through a hard time, it's really easy for us to go, how am I going to handle this entire enormous thing that I'm battling? And at least in my life, it just comes down to that first action.
Yeah,
And it could be the tiniest thing. It could be the
yeah,
tiniest thing in your life
yeah.
that you can do, but then it's something you can look back on and say, I did that tiny thing, so I can do another one. And
Yeah, and I will say too, cancer was a pretty decent motivator for me, right?
yeah,
And then in regards to my business, I hired a coach and he was a great motivator, right? He held me accountable. And I paid good money for him. And that part of me was like, you're damn right I'm going to do this, because I'm not going to waste my money. I'm doing this, right? So yeah. And then of course, that's one of my roles, is being a coach, helping people become aware of their habits. Because, habits are ways that sometimes we don't even notice it ourselves, because we've been that way our entire life. It's our norm. And it takes someone else to say, why do you do this, or how do you do that, or to start questioning. And then when the going gets tough, a coach is a great person to have in your corner to keep you motivated and hold you accountable and say, you can do this, trust in yourself, you can do this. And that's where I come into play, is to help demystify surrendering and get into the nitty-gritty and stay motivated, because you are worth it, right? Dr. Joe has a phrase that I love yourself enough to do this.
I love that. That's
Yeah,
great.
I know. It's just and that's what it's about. That's what it's about. And I call myself a surrender coach, but really, essentially, what I am is a relationship coach. Relationship with yourself.
Right.
Nurturing the relationship with yourself. And when you are fully nurtured and embracing yourself, then all of the relationships that you have with other people, family, friends, strangers, co-workers, are benefiting from that.
That makes all the sense in the world, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And not just relationships. I mean, it has benefited me financially, and it has benefited me obviously physically, right? Like the act of surrendering, it affects every area of your life.
Right.
It really does. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jacob, this has been incredible. Thank you for spending the time with me.
Thank you. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this as well.
This has been fun.
Yeah.
And you could say the website again?
innerhealthouterwealth.com. And people can also find me on Facebook under Jaka Duncan. Feel free to send me a friend request or a private message. I have a private Facebook group. It's called Surrender, Your Ticket to Freedom. I have a few videos posted there that where I demystify the whole act of surrendering a bit more. And yeah, so different ways. I'm on Instagram as well, Jaka Duncan. I'm not as active on Instagram, but I'm there.
Right.
So yeah, lots of different ways to find me. And I'd love to connect. Thank you.
We will talk again soon, I am sure.
I hope so. And I look forward to it. All right.
Have a good one. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye.